G'day, folks. It's Coach here, and we are doing a LVO recap stream. So it's been a couple of weeks since the Las Vegas Open. I obviously had some travel delays. I had some things that I needed to do, but I want to take the opportunity to talk with Matt the Noog, and let's talk LVO. Let's talk about the world's biggest Age of Sigmar tournament. Let's talk a little bit about our lists and what we were trying to achieve. Spoiler, we both went 4-1 at the tournament, though we didn't make the top 8 cut. Let's talk about the event, what we liked about it, how it might differ from other events. It's certainly a little bit different to some of the tournaments that I've been to in the past. And I'll bring up some of the terrain maps and the rules that some people really like, some people are now considering, some people disliked, and talk through our games. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for inviting me onto the show. I knew you missed me too much, so you're always going to have me on, even though I
Well,
technically reject you for the Beast of Chaos video. But,
to be fair, I had you booked and I loaned you out to Warhammer Weekly. So Vince
True.
and Tyler, you owe me one. But how's LVO? Like, just for someone who maybe has never been to a large tournament, I assume people might have seen my little 10-minute vlog around what the LVO is all about and what it looks like and what it feels like. But talk to me about why the LVO exists, why it's important. Why do 300 odd people come to this particular event every year? Give me the flavor.
So LVO was, so this is my second time going to LVO this year. My first time was in last year in 2022. And that's honestly what made me fall in love with going to, Age of Sigmar events in general. There's just, Vegas is a lot of fun, Viva Las Vegas. And then when you go into the stadium with like hundreds of people playing Age of Sigmar from all over the country, or even in this Leppänen LVO all over the world, it just makes you feel like, wow, it's not just my local community that loves this game. It's all of us that love this game. And we all get to come together in this very rare time and weekend. And, you get to play all kinds of different people, unless you get unlucky and match with someone local. But other than that, you get to play a bunch of different people, and it's awesome. It's one of those indescribable things. And I think that's why when I went to my first LVO last year, I fell in love with it, and I went to like over 30 events last year, and plan to do so again this year.
I remember when, so anyone who might have followed the channel for a while might already know this, but I've been playing Warhammer since the late 90s, but I never went to a tournament until Age of Sigmar. For whatever reason, I lived in a small country town. I didn't really know there was big tournaments. And like match play was fun when Age of Sigmar first came out. But I remember my first major tournament, CanCon, which back in like 2016, 17, I can hear keyboard, Matt, was like 50 players. And that kickstarted my competitive journey. And for me, these major tournaments, whether it's CanCon, whether it's Adepticon, LVO, Bobo, there are major tournaments all around the world, 100 plus players. It does really help you introduce you to the broader scene, and it got me really excited to play match play. Like, it became bigger than just your local store. That's what I felt in love with. And as you mentioned, I traveled 15 hours across the world to play. There was also a bunch of people from Scotland, from England. Who else were the internationals? There was some French players.
Yeah, French and Belgium, and then maybe someone from Australia. I don't know if you were the only one from Australia, but
I was the only Australian in Age of Sigmar. There was a couple in 40K. And then there was also obviously you Canadians and things like that. So it was a big convergence. I think it ended at 325 players approximately. I think it sold like 380, and then there was obviously drops out. So absolutely incredible. Games Workshop did a stream. They also broadcast the games as well. Won't go into that. I know there was some contention with Rob and what was going to happen and what wasn't going to happen in the coverage. But overall, I enjoyed it. You?
Yeah, no, I mean, It was a blast. Give me like a second because one of my cats is giving me a hard time.
All right, one of his cats, and I actually might bring up some photos. So for anyone who hasn't seen the small little video, oops, spoiler alert. We had a great time in Vegas for it. And that probably to me was one of the most exciting things about tournaments like this is when you can do things outside the tournament. It's more than just your 5 or 6 games. It's the things that happen outside, whether it was going out to dinner, whether it's going out to drinks, whether it is, people doing karaoke, people going out to bars, people going out, having house parties, whatever it is. It's always these cool moments. And probably one of the things that I really enjoy about American tournaments is that you guys have a lot of hotel tournaments, which means people stay in the hotel. Unlike probably where I live, a lot of people will drive back home and they've got kids and family, and I don't grudge them at all. But being there and having breakfast, having lunch, having dinner, going out for drinks really makes the tournament special.
Yeah, so I mean, this to me was definitely like a highlight because usually with some of the GTs that I have back in like Southern California, we usually have it in like a gym or like a smaller like room where it's like it's cool that we get to like meet up, but we don't get to actually stay there. In Vegas, you actually get to stay there, and it's very easy to run into like your the opponent you just played in your last match, or like your favorite AoS like celebrity or just someone that and it's just like you're in Vegas, you have a good time. There's no like commitments. You're just there just to play and, you know, have the time of your life. And, that's why I like, definitely came back a second time and I plan to keep going to more LVOs from here on out. And, it was really cool. Coach could hang out with all these other people, but of course he chooses the SoCal gang, as you see in one of the pictures right here, most of the nights.
I did get brought into a lot of the events just organically. I don't know what happened. I just kept getting like a magnet, although I am representing Austin Weird Knobs right now. So shout out to those crew. Absolutely legends. I just want to call out one quick comment from the chat, which I think is really important to call out. And then we'll get into the event and we'll talk a bit about like what happened and all that good stuff. But one of the things that these major tournaments, and I can't stress enough that Mike's Comic Dens mentioned, it's the friends that you make. And I know for me, when I went to my first tournament, I didn't know a lot of people back then. And, I went to England before I really started my channel. And I didn't really know anybody when I played at Blood and Glory. But it's the conversations and the people that you meet that often kickstarts the relationships. And then you run at them in other events. Or, you start hearing about events outside your community and you start seeing people again. You start adding people to Facebook or Discord and the relationships really grow. So while it can be intimidating for the first time you go, it just gets better and better and better. So I can't stress enough if you've never been to jump in and actually go to a tournament for the first time.
Yeah, and I think, from LVO, there came, there was a birth of this saying that was kept saying out is, make 5 friends, not 5-0. And I feel like, that's like the most beautiful thing about, Age of Sigmar, this hobby. And another thing I really wanted to say was that like, that I had known some people in, the AOS, Discord for like years at this point. And, getting a chance to like, either see them again or meet them for the first time at, LVO was just, amazing, because it's like, oh, I've talked to these people for years and now now I get to meet them in person and, it doesn't feel any different. Feels like an old friend I hadn't seen in a while.
Yeah. I like to meet a lot of online people as well, and it's pretty surreal. Whether it's the people you interact with on Twitter or on Discord or on a Facebook group, or you've never met. Honey Nuts mentioning best thing about Warhammer, at events isn't the Warhammer, it's the people that you can nerd out with around Warhammer. And I agree wholeheartedly. Shout out to Moonface the cat. I can hear who's trying to say hello.
Let me bring him on stream because I know he's your favorite.
I got to stay at Matt's house, and I think I might have got allergies from cats, or at least the Californian weather. But
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is dry right now. Yeah.
Talk to me about your list. So you took the Beast of Chaos. I guess one, what's this list all about? And two, what were you trying to achieve at the LVO? Were you going for a top 8 spot? Were you going for best in faction? Were you just going for fun? Like, what was the goal of this tournament for you?
Honestly, it was pretty much all of the above that you mentioned as to, why I was taking this LVO. I've always loved this army. I've played this army since 2008, 2019 when the book came out, and then when they got their white dwarf buff, we did that one video last year, and now we're here. So yeah, I mean, besides having fun, my personal goal was to get best in faction ITC for Beast, because I was competing against the eventual LVO winner G1 Noah Singh, a good buddy of mine, and I'm really happy that he took it. We had a really fun competition these past couple months leading into LVO, and I want to see if I can make the top 8 spot. I was pretty confident in this this list. I've been playing it for a while, and basically the gist of this list is it's old Beast of Chaos. I decided to go with the spell enhancement for all of my wizards because all the spell effects are really strong, like Sundering Blades, Extra Rend, Hailstorm, half move, half run, half charge, Wild Rampage, make a unit reroll wounds with -1 to save, and then because this is an old Beast of Chaos, 30 Zongors can rally on a 4-up, and then they easily get to Rend 2 with a spell, Rend 3, and then Zongor and Lighten on Disc were really strong. And then, I also had Dragon Ogres and Bounty Hunters because with all 3 of these threats and Bounty Hunters, they could clear like most hammers and threats like really efficiently. And with Allherd, I choose to summon a lot. So then it's abusing the old Beast of Chaos summoning mechanic, and this is what it's really effective for. So yeah.
I might call out that the LVO was the last of Season 1 General's Handbook 2022. So it was old Beast of Chaos, so the last book, not the one that's literally hit the shelf. Funnily enough, my preview videos went live at the LVO. So it was the older book with the White Dwarf update, and it was with Galatian Veteran. So if you're looking for like Tunnel Master and things like that, it was not Season 2 yet. So you've got some interesting models here. You've got some hammers, you got some anvils. You wanted to do well. You were hoping to top 8. Was that a goal of yours?
It wasn't like something I was like, it had to happen, but it would have been nice because I was trying to catch up with G1 Noah Singh in like points. It was more like, let's see if I can do this. And hey, 4-1 is still like an amazing record at LVO, honestly, because LVO, in my experience, there are no easy games. You're playing against like, even going 3-2 is like, difficult at a place like LVO. But, my main focus besides, doing well with Beast of Chaos, because I've always played the army, is that, I'm there to have a good time with my friends and make new friends. So, I think that's the biggest thing that separates Age of Sigmar from a lot of games. And I feel like that's important.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at the final results, there was a large amount of really good players who had 3 and 2'd. So they won more than they lost. And I know they would have liked a 4-1 or 5-0 the tournament. But at times it was a real snake's den. It was very competitive. A lot of people have been practicing. These major tournaments are like the pinnacle. So people have been practicing and list building and teching and preparing for that top 8. And it's interesting, actually, because when you look at the people who came like 14th all the way down to like 60th, they were 4-1s. You would expect 4-1 to be a little bit higher, but when you look at the points differential of like one dropped battle tactic, allowing your opponent to score too many grand strategies or battle tactics, then that would be the difference between you ending 20th and you ending 40th, regardless of you going 4-1. So it was a very, very, very tight field.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, I think people before they hear about Age of Sigmar, or the things they hear about Age of Sigmar, they assume, the game's less competitive, or like the people are less competitive. And then honestly, in my experience, for 8 people that play this game at events, we are competitive, but I think we're competitive in a healthy way. So I think that's, this game can be like very intense, but to me, that's what, like, I honestly love to compete. Like, I used to compete in sports a lot, and playing Age of Sigmar and doing all these events reminds me of all these like sports I used to play. And the competition is great, people are great. So yeah.
What were you worried about? Like going into a major tournament, and I imagine a lot of people are thinking the same thing, right? Whether it's Adepticon comes up next month, whether it's going to be any of the major tournaments that come up, how do you think about the meta? And are you thinking about certain lists that you want to counter? Are there armies that you're trying to match up with? Are there things that concern you that you're trying to build for? Like what goes in? Because it's easy, right? When you have a local meta. I know what certain armies are popular. I know people like to go high drop or low drop, or whatever my local scene is. But when we go East Coast, West Coast internationals, how do you consider that with your lists?
So with this list I have in mind, it was definitely like, it was definitely made with my experience of playing people locally, and then when I attended the East Coast event Everwinter the month before LVO. So I think my biggest concerns were, do if I have to fight other horde armies, that's why I have 3 units of bounty hunters, and I was also afraid of things like horror gas to enlist, because 30 Zongors definitely I need the command points, or I need to use my Triumph Indomitable to make sure that they don't run. And I also didn't like to run into like AOE mortal wounds, and I was also thinking about ogres and slaves of darkness, because ogres with their mass shooting, which is a hurtful, and then plus iron blasters and stonehorn at the time, and then slaves of darkness was also really popular. So because there were very high armor saves, and old beast was really good at cracking armor saves, that is why I built my list around that, to deal with the most common denominators of lists I was going to run into. And I actually did fight 2 ogre lists, so I was partially correct on like my predictions of what I was going to run into.
Did you run into a lot of hordes?
So in the games I played against ogres, and then I played against the Venetium list that actually got third place last year. And then my third game, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do think it was another. No, it was a Stormcast matchup, but that was against Owen Jackson. We'll get into that later. And
That's all
then
right. We'll show the lists, but like just from a prediction point of view, because I know when I got to my list, I was really concerned about, as you said, Slaves to Darkness and being able to have that Nurgle banner with the Nurgle mark and what that would mean to my 5 idiots on the table. So I ran Suns. I went with the Breaker tribe, so I had a Gatebreaker as my general, 40 wounds, ignoring Rend 1 and bouncing mortal wounds on a 6. I had King Broad, who got a little points discount, who is another 40 wound Mega Gargant, got access to prayers, some nice utility, not as damaging as the Gatebreaker, but having 2 units that have 40 wounds meant that I could soak up a lot of damage. I also had a War Stomper with the Flaming Weapon to do a lot of damage with its flail attack. So, sorry, the club attack. That was very much if I had to sacrifice it. And funnily enough, in game one, I did actually have to sacrifice it because I had 6 Varangard coming for my face. Then I took 3 baby man crushers. Now I could have taken another mega, but I wanted to have some bodies, given that there were some battle plans that had more than 4 objectives on the table. And I didn't want to be babying like the Nidus Path, right? I didn't want to have a Mega Gargant protecting my home objective when someone could teleport in my backfield. So I needed to have some babies that could either go steal objectives, who could screen, or could hold objectives. So very much I went with 3 megas, 3 babies, with a couple of artifacts, and hopefully getting the triumph, which I found most of the time I got at 1970. I don't think actually I think all 5 of my games I got the triumph, so I could get +1 to wound once per game. I was concerned about ogres, so I wanted to have 3 mega gargants that could soak up the damage. So finest hour. If I had to run the man crushers, they can run and charge, and they can do a 3d6 charge off the general. And I was a little bit worried about slaves, which is another reason I took the man crushers, because when they pile in, if I can roll double the wound, so if I have like a 2 wound idiot, if I can roll a 4 up, I can steal a model. So I could actually pluck the Nurgle banner straight out of the unit. So, and that actually came into play. So that was my list. I was more about just going and having fun, to be honest. I didn't really want to. I've been running Stormcast for the last 6 months, so I wanted something that was a bit more chilled. Means we could go out, we could have some fun, I could have conversation. I wasn't stressing about what I put in the sky, where I drop, what do I do. It was a very relaxing game.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what I
that's
found.
awesome. And honestly, with how the new Giants book has been panning out and stats wise, like it's honestly super impressive that you went 4-1 at LVO with Giants, because right now, in my opinion, they're not an easy army to play. Even though like, you did take the army to have like a relaxing time, you still have to like overcome, their weaknesses now with being more swingy.
And I literally changed my list 5 times, no practice. So I'm not trying to gloat, but I couldn't decide because of the meta. I really couldn't decide Look, I've been playing Gargant since they first dropped in 2019, I think it was, when the book very first came out. I was one of the first few that went 4-1 and did a really good performance in the second edition. So it wasn't like I just picked up this army and went 4-1, but I did change my list because it was really hard to settle on. The Beast Smasher went down in points. King Broad went down in points. Do I take 4 megas? Do I take 3 megas, 3 babies? Do I go for the triumph? Do I go for an endless spell? So that is my list. And it was easy to transport. Absolutely loved it. But something that I wanted to talk about before we get into our games is something that was quite, I wouldn't say unique to LVO. It's certainly a West Coast type of thing. And we see it at the AoS Worlds. It's certainly very common if you come from 40K. And that is terrain maps and the way that we set the game up. So look, if we go by the core rules, attacker gets to go deploy and go first. Defender gets to set up the terrain. In most cases, the TO has already set up the terrain, so defender has no benefit. Sometimes there are house rules where the defender can choose the side, attacker deploys first. Sometimes there's rules here and there, but you're very familiar with this. Matt, do you want to give us maybe the high level, how does this work? How do terrain maps work, and what do you like about them?
Yeah, so because terrain maps, this was basically developed. The whole pack for LVO was basically from my local TO, Gareth Thomas, pack, because he actually uses as guinea pigs to test all the rules and everything, and what to use before we finally finalized on this for the past year. So in our pack, defender and attacker roll off. Defender gets to choose to place terrain based off of where the T's are on the map. So you can decide which terrain pieces are, and we usually play with 8 pieces of terrain. So 2 of them are impassable, 2 of them are garrison, 2 of them are wildwood, and 2 of them are cover. And we feel like it's really important to play with because it actually affects the game a lot. And having 8 pieces of terrain, can actually, shift how movement is and the flow of the game in general. So defender places down terrain based off of the terrain map, and they cannot place garrisons on objectives. That's kind of our little cop in our pack because it's kind of abusive to place a garrison on objective because of how garrison rules are. So that's you can't put a garrison on objective. That's the only thing that's comped. But other than that, defender places terrain based off of the T's on the map, and then defender also gets to put down mysterious terrain like damned, mystical, deadly, etc. And then after they do all that, the attacker gets to pick sides. So that's the actual balance between attacker and defender. So even though defender does seem like it has a lot of power, the fact that attacker gets to pick sides encourages the defender to actually balance the map. So maybe even though they're tempted to try to make it favorable, the defender might make it favorable towards them. But then because the attacker gets to pick them, the side, they have to keep that in mind. And whoever is the attacker gets to drop first. So let's say if both the lists are 1 drop, and whoever wins the roll off, whoever won the roll off in the 1 drop versus 1 drop list has to seriously think about, would I rather place terrain or would I rather be able to one that dictates priority turn 1? So yeah.
I really like it. So much so that I'm probably going to take this or something very similar to my next GT, because there's been plenty of times, and look, there's pros and cons, right? I know that there are some people who really don't like terrain maps because you can have this very stock standard approach, which can feel really bad. Sometimes going to a table, having variety, having different types of terrain, that can be really exciting. At the same time, there's nothing worse than getting to a table where you get shafted with bad terrain layouts. People have moved the terrain and you can have an argument with your opponent. Hopefully that never comes up, but I know some people find themselves in that position. People have put their trays and, you're a Sylvaneth player and there's nowhere to put woods down, or, there can be really interesting problems that come up where the terrain map, where we've seen the AoS Worlds introduce it, West Coast, as you've mentioned, 40K use it a lot. I do like the interactivity and being able to move around terrain based on the battle plan. I think there's some things that could be tightened up. I know I didn't like the way that Impassable worked. I think, but that's a whole different conversation. I think the TO could set Impassable, but outside of that, I really enjoyed it, and I found that I gave away defender every time I could. Like, in fact, I don't think I set up the terrain at all. Like, I gave it to my opponent. I was happy to be attacker, to deploy first and choose side. And I found my opponents kept it fair. Like, they never tried to screw one person or the other. They tried to mirror it as best as possible, so there was no significant advantage.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's some matchups where like being defender sometimes makes it really, it makes it really hard for the opponent. But most of the time, because of how attacker defender works in the Old Town Throwdown pack, we used to jokingly call it the correct pack, but some East Coasters got offended. We love you guys, but yeah, I mean, because of the importance of attacker and defender, it encourages the defender to always make it balanced because the attacker is the one that gets the pick regardless. So you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to put all arcane on my side and I get to get it. Nope, the attacker gets to decide if you get to have all of that or not. And I feel like
I
playing with mysterious terrain, like, it's just, it spices up the game and it makes the game a lot more like interesting and fun.
Yeah, and blood clot plots, as mentioned, sometimes it is quite hard to get desecrate their lands because the terrain has been moved completely to the side outside of a deployment zone, or it's just really badly set up. At least you've got a bit more control here. There's a lot of benefits. I think my advice to anyone is to look at either the LVO pack or the Old Town Throwdown pack. I mean, wait till it's obviously updated for season 2, but give it a shot. See how you go. I think it's certainly something that I'd like to continue using because we don't use, at least in Australia, we don't use garrisonable, impassable, line of sight blocking terrain. We don't use it enough. And that has significant impacts to shooting being very powerful because there's not enough line of sight blocking terrain. Garrisonable, there's a lot of cool things you can do that we just don't really tap into unless you're Seraphon. So I think give it a shot, but I think there's something special here that people should consider.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was like at one point last year where shooting was really powerful, but because of how the Old Town Throwdown pack works, shooting was actually not the strongest. And it was really interesting to see like the results of our local meta with this pack versus everyone else in the world where like shooting may have been a little stronger because of how they handle terrain and
Yeah,
whatnot.
sometimes I've said this to a few people that sometimes we create our own problems. Like shooting can be really overpowered, but if we don't have the terrain to match and to hinder shooting, then of course, and we got like a very flat, one-dimensional terrain, lots of space, of course it becomes really powerful. And it's because we've created our own problems. So look for either line of sight, wildwood kind of rules, or improve the quality of terrain. I know that's easier said than done. Anyway, game 1. So we're playing in the presence of idols. You're up against Don Madduck. I'm up against Daniel Dowell. Talk to me a little bit about your game. How did it go, and any highlights of the game?
So when I saw what my pairing was, day one, and I saw this, I feel like, oh, I'm thrown into the gauntlet. No easy game, no okay matchup. This is, a true test for my LVO list, and I was actually really looking forward to see how this would pair into ogres for the tournament because I've been playing against ogres a lot before they, up the points cost for Noblars and Iron Blasters. And having fought against ogres so many times, I've got to this conclusion where it's like, okay, even though my army at the time, Beast of Chaos, has a lot of rend, there's really no point trying to kill the Stonehorn because it just, -1 a wound, 5 a ward. It's just too much of an investment to get rid of. Where if I didn't kill it in one turn, then everything else like the Iron Blaster and Lead Belchers were going to touch me. So my gameplay on this game was, to just play for the objectives, use my board presence because board presence is king, as I've learned from Bill Souza, and then take out the Iron Blasters where I can. So I mean, it was a long grind, and I lost. By the end of the game, I lost most of my heroes. I lost, most of my units. I finally lost the 30-man blob of Zongors by the 4th turn, but because I strictly was focused on my goal of just taking out everything else, all the lead belchers were gone by the end of the game. All the iron blasts were taken care of. There was just only the Stonehorn left on his side while I had some summoned units, and I was able to outgrind him. So I didn't try the focus really wasn't to try to table him per se, but it was just to play for the board and just take out the iron blast and priority targets because those things are extremely difficult to deal with. And because I always play for high drops, I can see where he deploys, and I don't care if they always give me first because with old Beast of Chaos, it lets me, summon units, it lets me get into position and, set up for, possibly being doubled from turn 1 to turn 2. So yeah,
Do you
I barely took to
remember?
win.
Do you remember what his three idols were and what your three idols were? So for anyone who doesn't know the battle plan, we both pick 3 units that are idols. There is some battle shock reduction abilities with your idols, as well as if an idol kills an idol, you get some extra victory points.
Yeah, so pretty much his idols, from what I remember from the top of my head, are the Frost Lord on Stonehorn and two of his Iron Blasters, while mine were the 30 Zongors, my Shaggoth, and my Zongor General. The reason why I made my idols, these 30 Zongors, because I rallied them on a 4-up, so it's really hard to kill. And then my Shaggoth and my General Zongor Shaman on disc, I hid them most of the time because the Wildwoods are hid them behind a garrison, so they can't be shot at. Because I thought about putting the Zongor Lion on disc as like the idols, but because I wanted them to get stuck in and deal with the threats, I knew that they were going to get clapped back at some point. So I wanted to try to deny as many idol points as possible. That was kind of like my goal.
Yeah, that's the trick, right? Is that you put a target on a unit, and then if it's one that you think you're gonna buff up, it makes it very easy to start targeting it. But if you start going somewhere else and not giving up those points, then yeah, there's some good stuff in there. So overall, good game. A lot of shooting here between 3 Iron Blasters, the 4 units of Lead Belchers. Usually, you see things like this where it's like a castle, right? You've got your Noblars as a screen. You then have Lead Belchers kind of tagged around throughout the game to be able to shoot with an Unleash Hell, protecting the Iron Blasters. And I don't see the trophy rack. I don't see the hero sniping trophy rack. So
He did have so he's 3 drops, so yeah, there's no way he couldn't fit trophy rack in the list. So
which is very common. But overall, good game. You won. So you picked up your first victory at the LVO.
yeah, it was like, okay, I had a really good test, and Don Maddock was a really awesome opponent. It was really close. We got each other waters, and I think we got each other like alcohol after. So he's like, you know what, this is why I love LVO. I get to play somebody new, and I get to play against a hard list with my own tested, and see how it goes. So the MVPs of that game for me was Zongors, because they were an expert conquerors, so it was really hard for him just to get me off the objectives.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I will miss expert conquerors, I think, especially as hordes start to come back. So my first game against Daniel Darrel was a Knights of the Empty Throne, Slaves to Darkness. So I was worried about playing Slaves to Darkness, and here we are, Slaves to Darkness. I was worried about the Nurgle banner. Here we are. There is 20 Chaos Warriors with the Nurgle banner, so that is going to reduce the rend by 1 and also -1 to wound as well. So it makes that unit of 20 Chaos Warriors super durable, especially when the Chaos Sorcerer Lord puts its ability to just give it a 6-up ward. So it's an automatic, it's not a spell, it's just like point and click. Really, the concern for me here was the Varanguards. There was a unit of 6 Varangard, which were the general. Varangard once per game can fight twice. And then the Mark of Khorne makes them really killy in combat. So there's some really good boost there. It was a very interesting mix with the Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore. You had a Chaos Lord on foot. You had some Knights and some really good combinations going in. But going into this game, I got to give away first, if I remember correctly. I think he was higher drops than me, or at least either way, he went first. His Varangard zoomed up the board and hit my War Stomper. So my War Stomper was the only thing he could hit. By the way, the Chaos Lord, the Varangard, and the Chaos Warriors were the idols, while I gave my 3 Mega Gargants the idols. They were the most killy things and the most survivable things. So I thought, if anything, they were the ones going to do the killing, and they wouldn't be giving it up, or it would make it a lot harder. Charged up the Varangard up the board, had some incredible fluffs, and my War Stomper remained on like 1 or 2 wounds. So even with the double fighting, it wasn't able to kill the War Stomper. And then somehow with a miraculous swing, I think my War Stomper killed 2 or 3 Varangard.
Wow.
Even though it's got like 1, yeah, like the whiffs of the century. I think he also forgot to put the 6-up ward on them before they ran up the board. It was one of those, like, maybe a little bit flustered at the start of the tournament, maybe a little bit of ring rust, but I killed a couple of the Varangard. Then I was able to start kind of like just kind of whittle it down, right? Retreat the War Stomper out of combat, start healing up. I would then charge in with like King Broad that he would be able to start pulling. Or no, it was the Gatebreaker that started pulling down the remaining Varangard. And now that they use their once per game double fight, I could kind of go in there, clear them out, do some mortal wounds. When Mega Gargants and War Stompers charge, they'll do D3 or D6 mortal wounds, depending on the variant. And then I could just start doing some attrition. For me, the big kind of like highlight was I kind of alluded to it in the list build is the 20 Chaos Warriors. They've got one model that has a banner, and at the time, King Broad was in the middle of combat and he wrapped around his Chaos Warriors all around the King Broad. I'm like, okay, I can kind of survive it. I can do Finest Hour, all out defense. I can do some defensive things. Then I charged in a Man Crusher. And when a Man Crusher piles in, as I mentioned, if I can roll a dice that is equal or double than the wounds characteristic, so in this case, it's a 4-up, I could steal if I'm within 1 inch of the banner, I could steal it. So I literally slay that model, and that would then remove the minus to rend ability. So that was pretty brutal. Otherwise, it just I was able to do enough damage by turn 2 that my opponent wasn't able to score anything else. I kind of accepted his damage. I belted him enough that I would walk away with that win.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying, Slaves of Darkness was really common at the tournament, and this is a really hard matchup for Giants because of all the banners and the armor saves, and but I will say the War Stomper I think swings this matchup because even though he could be at 1 wound left, if enough models are around him, he could still get up to 10 attacks on his club. So he actually is like he still hit significantly hard, and to me, because I used to play Giants a little bit, War Stompers to me are the most reliable Gargants.
Especially if you put flaming weapons, so it means those club attacks are 3 damage each. So if you are within range, you can do up to 10 attacks with the club, doing 3 damage apiece. So it can be brutal if you have that right combination. So you and I both 1-1.
Yeah. So onwards.
I feel like you've lost the priority roll against your allergies though. So
yeah, sorry, I've been like constantly wiping my eyes. It's I've been working. I was working earlier today, and it's just my allergies act up.
Oh, good. I know what it was like in your house getting allergies. Round 2 was against the Prize of Galay. I was up against James West, who, funnily enough, when I was at Adepticon 2019, I actually played James West, and almost an exact same build, very, very similar. Where he beat up on my poor Gits, my poor Squigs at the time. Now who's laughing? Look at Squigs rules now. While you got to play Jeremy, who I've had on the channel from last year, who ran a Phoenician Cities to Sigma, very like, what are you doing? This is insanity. And he brought a very similar list, some tweaks to this list. But talk to me about the game. Talk to me about Prize.
Yeah, so yeah, Garrett Thomas understands me right now, but yeah. So when I was playing against Jeremy, I'm not even gonna try to say his last name because I feel like I'm gonna butcher it. I was kind of told ahead of time that, oh yeah, this is the guy that made top 8 last year and got 3rd place, and then I suddenly remember who he was because I remember watching some of his games. So I was just like, okay, after playing against 3 Iron Blasters and an Ogre player, even though a lot of people don't play Phoenician, he's probably the only one in the world that does. He was really good. So I was like mentally preparing myself. Okay, this is gonna be like this is gonna be a battle, and it excited me. So with how his list works, Golden. I think I'm trying to. I might mix this up, but essentially, he has an artifact on one of his phoenixes on his phoenixes that every time he has a save roll of 6, he heals. And then with how anointed on Frostfire phoenixes work, if you cast a spell around them, they get another +1 to save. So it's really easy to like save stack on these phoenixes. And before we played our game, I think he has as many drops as I did. So it was really interesting to see that. Okay, wow, I actually get to decide priority for once, which is like, different for me. So, I opted to give him first because I was like, you know what, let's see what he can do. I don't think he can do much first turn, which was probably my mistake as to why I lost my game against him, because he realized that, okay, with my bounty hunters and everything, even with Phoenix Guard being on a 4-up ward save, I could outgrind him and with summoning him. So he did a giant gamble where he buffed up the Phoenix with Phoenix Pyre Ashes, and got all the buffs loaded onto it. And then he made a 9 to 12 inch charge, literally what he needed, because I gave him a tiny 3-inch gap so he can smash my Hearthstone. And he smashed my Hearthstone, and that Phoenix tied up my entire army for the rest of that game because he was just safe stacking, and I just didn't have the red to like get through. And the other tricky things about his list that because the assassins are hiding in like the flagellants or the Phoenix Guard, he can run like his Phoenix or Flagellants outside of 3 inches of me, and the assassin can come out and lock something in combat. And if something in his list dies, the entire army gets +1 a hit, +1 a wound. So it makes them really efficient. And then Flagellants and Bounty Hunters really like shocked me that game because he with them and Bounty Hunters, um, they went into my 30 Zongors and they killed about 20 of them in one go. A unit of Flagellants, just basic. I think it was like 10 of them, and I was just like, this is insane. I like never seen how this like works. And I think he thoroughly outplayed me. And even though like I was like, now with this loss, I can't catch up to Noah G1 thing, for like best beast. But I got to play a really cool opponent. He was really awesome to play. And because he's been playing this list literally as I was talking to him forever since it first came out. I was cheering for him to like make top 8 because he's like, okay, this is a list that no one knows how to fight, and I certainly didn't because I've never played against Phoenicium, but yeah, and I think if people want to see what a Phoenicium looks like, they should look at this, even though Bounty Hunters and Extra Conquerors is gone, but this is still like a you know it's a trading army.
Yeah.
It trades with you and tries to outgrind you and just play for points. He doesn't care if he gets table as long as he wins.
The Phoenix Guard there, the 3 units of Phoenix Guard have a 4-up ward save as well. So a 4-up base save that can easily go down to 3s. The Frost Heart Phoenix has like a -1 to wound aura. So there's 2 of those. As you mentioned, if a spell is successfully cast, I think it's within 12, they get +1 to their save, which the Hurricanum gets +1 to its casting anyway. You've got the Hexbane Hunters, the Underworld's Warband with a 5-up ward as well. The Shadow Warriors come in from reserve, and as you mentioned, the Assassins. So yeah, it's a really techie, very different Cities of Sigmar list than you would traditionally see with like Tempest Die or Hallowheart or Living City. But I'm glad to see Jeremy is persisting with that build because he did top 8, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was like, again, an awesome opponent, and his list was just like superly like well crafted. Everything has a role in this, and yeah, I mean, it maybe inspires me to like try Venetium at some point because it's just a really cool list.
Yeah, I dig it. So my second game, as I mentioned, was actually a rematch against James West, who I might have played even game 1 at LVO, Adepticon, sorry, 2019. So it was great to see James again. I've also had him on the channel, and he was running, as you can see, Archaon, 3 units of Varangard, the War Shrine, and the Corvus Cabal. So the Corvus were going to be coming in from reserve, helping him score things like desecrate their lands, screen if he needs to screen. He would mark Archaon as Slanesh. So even though the rest of the Varangard are all marked Khorne to get the extra damage, he was going to mark Archaon to get a 3d6 charge. So he would get the 3d6 charge from the Chaos War Shrine, as you can see there. So really brutal. And so he got turn 1, as you can see. James was a 1-drop. He would dictate the terms of battle. He would get basically in my face turn 1, and we would trade a lot. He has 3 units of 3 Varangard who can fight once per game, as I mentioned from game 1. But what I found was because of the speed, because of demonic speed, the spell, which went onto a unit of Varangard, it was in combat turn 1. Archaon with a 3d6 charge from the War Shrine buffing Archaon. He was in combat or right in my face turn 1. I was able to fight out. So the game surprisingly went 5 rounds, but I found that when I got to like turn 5, I just didn't have enough bodies to be able to score battle tactics. I scored 4 out of my 5 battle tactics, but because of the amount of damage that came to me early on, I kind of ran out of steam. So the game kind of ended 24-12. And it was just basically trading. I could never get a double turn. So, and he got a double turn actually. He got Eye of Ed Sheeran, and was able to get the double turn as well, which just really hurt. But it was a great game. I would have loved a different battle plan where maybe some things were split out a little bit more. Because again, with Prize of Galay, there's only one objective is going to be active, so you got to be smart with your deployment. But it was just too much for me too soon. And although, as I mentioned at the end, I think at the end there was Archaon, and that was it. It was Archaon versus King Broad, but there was nothing I could score because I did Desecrate in turn 4. But otherwise, I didn't have enough bodies to do anything turn 5 because the Man Crushers were gone, the other Megas were gone. Literally, it was Archaon and King Broad.
Yeah, I mean, I played both Slaves of Darkness and Giants, and I think, as soon as I saw Knights of the Empty Throne, I'm like, oh, that is not a fun time for Giants. And because Archaon can set the turn priority, because he knows who's going first, it really lets Archaon and the Baron Guard be aggressive, especially because Baron Guard can double fight, and when the Baron Guard charge, they're red 3. So, Giants do not like that.
Yeah, so he gave me the top of turn 1. So I just like snuck a little baby Man Crusher to tag the objective. But then he had done the Eye of Ed Sheeran, knew he was getting the priority. So going to the bottom of turn 1, he guaranteed himself the top of turn 2. He could just go super aggro and was rewarded for it. It was a great game. I really enjoyed it, but man, they hit like a truck.
Yeah.
So you and I are both 1 win, 1 loss. 1-1.
Yeah.
Game 3. So I've played 2 Slaves to Darkness. Diversity plus here for me right now. You have played a Cities and you played Slaves. Your third game is against...
was my first one, but yeah.
Oh, your first, yes. The third game was against the Owen Jackson. So you played Owen coming in from Wales, England. I was up against Anthony Sterling. So you're up against Stormcast. I was up against Seraphon. Talk to me about how this went.
So, as soon as I got to play, I'm like 1-1 right now, let's see where the bracket ends. And I play against Owen Jackson, and I'm just like, what? How did he end up here? Because he's usually like one of the biggest champions out, in United Kingdom. But I was really happy to like play him because, I haven't talked to him yet, but I've seen him online. I also watch Honest Wargamers, so I see him mentioned a lot. So, I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. And as soon as Owen Jackson sees me, I just hear him call me the Nooge, and I'm just like, shit. He knows who I am. So, we start hugging, we start chatting. And, this is how I know this is going to be a fantastic game. And this actually ends up being my favorite game for the weekend. And this is definitely one of my favorite opponents of all time. So he was playing Stormcast Hammers of Sigmar, and he was playing what people have coined the Reign of Stars list. Because, Cells and Prime does, some AoE mortals. Slan with comments called as AoE mortals. Stardrake, has a 30-inch shooting attack, which is like, big. And then it has Arcane Tome, so it can summon the Everblaze Comet to do more AoE mortals. And on top of that, Fulminators also do mortals. So, it's just a lot of mortals all at once, and it tries to cause a lot of bravery and battle shock tests. And, even though it's really light on bodies, everything was just extremely hard to kill in this list. So, and even though we were playing on a Stilk Seal Nest, which is Beast of Chaos best map, I still feel like I had to deploy very carefully against Owen Jackson, because if I left him a giant opening for Comet to hit everything, or if I decide to give him a hole for the Fulminators or Prime to get in at the wrong time, then it's a bad time for me. So
yeah, this very much so. Just AoE, by the way, if you're new to the terminology, it's area of effect. So basically, like the Comet will do damage. I think it's within a 10-inch radius. Prime picks up on in the battlefield, and within 3 inches or 24-inch range, and anything within 3 inches of that point takes D3 mortal wounds. There's just a lot of damage that happens at a radius, as opposed to pick a model, it takes damage. You've obviously got a lot of mortals from the Fulminators. You have Call to Aid, so it can bring back one of those units of Vanquishers once per game for a command point. And that Star Drake can be quite tanky with some of its build.
Yeah, so with how we deployed, because my biggest advantage in this matchup, besides having my rend, was just the amount of bodies I can like present to him and like just keep constantly summoning. So he knew he had to like put me on a clock. But because he had to deploy defensively, he only sat on 2 or 3 of his objectives while I was able to like deploy units on all 4 of my objectives because I wanted to spread out for Comet. Because I played against, some locals here were like I guess they were very inspired by Owen Jackson's Rate of Stars list and were playing it a lot. So I actually had like a good amount of experience playing against this type of list, before, my game against Owen. And, as the game, was going on, there was a lot of like trading, I would lose maybe some of my chaff units and I would lose like my Dragon Ogres and a unit of Songward Light on disc. He brought his prime down turn 1 and then he charged me, but because it was only on 3 attacks, he kind of whiffed. And then I had 6 Zongward Light on disc go in, and even with Finest Hour on the prime, my Zongward Light on disc had extra Ren on them, so they were about Ren 3 when they went in and they shut off commands. So they were able to take him out in combat despite the 4-up ward. And then, however, the Salon was still causing me like big problems, even though I did get a turn where like I actually gave him the double from turn 1 to turn 2 because he couldn't unbind Comet in his turn actually, and then in my turn bottom 2 I actually unbound Comet, so I stopped that thing from coming up until like round 4 or round 5. But then eventually though his dragon and his fulminators did push up and they got into the 30 Zongors and killed them all. They smashed my Herdstone, so things are kind of looking bad for me. However, I was able to like, because of the spread I had on the map, I was able to keep up on the objectives and everything, and I was able to like make sure I always held more and played for my battle tactics. And then I think at one point in the game, he failed to get a battle tactic, so he had to like catch up to me, even though he had taken all of my objectives on my side, and I had taken most of his objectives on his side. So we kind of like traded places. So this game pretty much came down to the Slon had to go into melee combat to kill one more Zongor Enlightened on disc on his own with 2 wounds left because there was 3 models in that unit, but it was being peppered with range and mortal wounds for the Slon and everything. So I had to make 2 5-up saves, and I rolled 2 5-ups because if he lived, if he died, then I would not be able to get hold 1, hold more, and then burn. But because I was able to get that, I managed to win by a single point. So yeah, I think Owen Jackson is definitely the best Stormcast player I've ever played against. I mean, I think he's just a really like good player in general, even though he doesn't like main Stormcast necessarily. But it was definitely this was day 1, round 3 of LVO, and I was exhausted, but the game was so much fun where it's just like, I honestly didn't care at that point whoever won or lost. I got to play, a really great opponent who I would normally get to play because he lives all the way in the United Kingdom. And, we got to hang out after, have some drinks, and, it was great.
Just shows you that even top tier players are still a lot of fun. We're not all here to make you cry and, make you have a bad time. Everyone is here to push around their war dollies and have a good time. So you beat Owen Jackson. As you mentioned, probably a little bit surprised to see Owen 1-1 at the point in time, but definitely an interesting one, especially because of the way that just with the area of effect mortal wounds, with the amount of bodies, and I had a similar game later on that I'll show, and for me, I couldn't care less about the amount of area of effect chip mortal wounds. So
yeah. I mean, the fact that he was like 1-1 before we played, though, just to show it was that LVO was extremely difficult to do really well at, which adds to the challenge and makes it more fun.
Yeah, Gareth just giving me grief in the chat. I'm saying people are good people. Even like you look at Scooter, you look at Caleb, you look at all the players who are at the top. They all had a lot of fun. So, Gareth, be quiet. I went up against a person also by the name of Anthony from Seattle. I think it was Anthony Sterling. Diversity finally, yay. I got to play against Seraphon Thunder Lizards, which is a bit annoying because they have some ability to reduce damage. So for me, it was all going to be about doing as much mortal wounds as possible on the charge, being able to kind of hopefully get through the screen of Saurus warriors, which would be able to block out those Bastiladons, be able to block out the all these like his Slan Star Master, his Star Priest, all of his little priests and wizards that are hiding around his temple. I needed to get through that screen, and the Bastiladons who start off on a 1+ save are absolute pains in the backside. So you got to put a lot of resources to chip them down. But getting to them is easier said than done, especially when you have things like Saurus Knights, Carnosaurs, the Starblood Stalkers, those types of things protecting the Bastiladons who are just shooting you at range. So turn 1, Anthony moved up the board, probably not as aggressively as I thought. I thought Anthony would move up. So I thought he'd move up and not quite go for my objectives turn 1, but I thought he would at least go to the middle of the board. Instead, he stayed relatively stagnant and just kind of protected his backboard, right? Or his side of the board. But the deployment distance between us wasn't that much. So it meant that I could go in, and on, I think, turn 1, I charged in Man Crushers. Well, I charged in 1 Man Crusher because I kept 2 in the backfield to protect some home objectives. I charged in all 3 Mega Gargants turn 1. So on the charge, they do D6 mortal wounds. The Man Crushers do D3 mortal wounds. So I could get around some of that damage reduction with mortals on the charge. I could then start clearing those screens and then start hitting things like the Bastiladons. I Colossal slammed his Carnosaur and moved it from one combat into another. So it's got this, like, we've got this cool little monstrous rampage where I can basically on a 3-up pick your monster up, swing it around the board as long as it stays within 1 inch of my my mega. And it could mean that I can pull it into combat with another mega, or I could pick you up and move you off an objective, or I can do certain things, move you out of buff ranges. Basically, we traded for a little bit, but because of the amount of mortal wounds, I was able to start like grinding things down, pulling out his scoring. Like the Saurus were gone, the Carnosaur was gone by like turn 2, I think, maybe turn 3 at best. I think one Bastiladon was gone by turn 2. The second one was gone by turn 3, if not the top of turn 4. And there was just an overwhelming amount of Mega Gargants on his side of the board that just made it too hard for him to catch up. We ended 32-11. If I didn't have the mortals, if I was an army that didn't have mortals on the charge, this would have been a lot harder of a game. But just with the amount of tools that I had at my disposal meant that I could handle that.
Oh. Wow.
Cool.
Is there 2 of me?
Yeah, there's 2. No, we're all good now.
All right.
It's a bit weird. So that was my game. A lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs, as you mentioned. Game 3 is always tiring. You know, he would use prayers to boost up those Bastiladons to have like a more than a 1+ save, and there was wards and there was random stuff going on. But again, it was just pure grind.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely an even matchup with Giants and Seraphon, because while, you know, Giants don't like -1 reduction damage, Seraphon does not like 140, 50 wounds sitting in their face, that they don't do the most damage, because I think Seraphon damage, they like to do it progressively throughout the game, where with Giants, you need to deal with them now, or, you know, with the first few turns, otherwise they'll just outscore you.
I will say though that with Silk, the battle plan Silk Steel Nests, having 8 objectives and I've only got 5 units makes it really tough, right? Because I win by overwhelming my opponent with the amount of damage, amount of bodies. But if I go too aggressive, there are 4 objectives in my backfield I can't defend. Which is why I chose not to do 4 Mega Gargants, but rather 3 and have 3 babies, so I could sit a couple on the backfield. They're strong enough to handle anyone who comes in from reserve. They're able to do enough damage as long as someone doesn't have like a really good summoning or teleporting ability. But I knew I could kind of and that was why I chose the 3 babies as opposed to 4 megas.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it definitely paid off because you got to see the missions ahead of time, so you can, like, you know, really figure out, okay, Do I want to take 4 megas or do I want to take babies? And I think, your plan of just getting, having the babies hold the back objectives or the other objectives while your 3 megas pin the Seraphon army, it paid off.
Well, it's more even if I didn't have access to the battle plans. Like everyone got to see them, but even then, like Silk Steel Nest, for example, Nidus Paths. There's a lot of ones where that'll reward you for having something that can protect a backfield or protect a corner. So, just something to keep in mind. And again, why you might not go for megas. Game 4 was Realmstone Cash. You were up against Randall Brasher with the Ogre Moor Tribe. So a second Ogre list out of 4 games. A little bit different, though. A little bit less artillery than the last one. This is probably more of a traditional Beast Claw Raider build with the Frostlord on Stonehorns, the 2 Frostlord on Stonehorns, a couple of Mournfang pack with a couple of Iron Blasters. And I got to play against Jeremy Shaw's Stormcast Eternals with basically dragons. So either Fulminators or dragons. So sorry, it's not meant to be Tempest Lords. It was incorrectly put into the system. It's Hallowed Knight. So Gardas is giving a 5-up bubble. Which was a real pain in the backside for this battle plan. Matt, how are you going?
Yeah, so this is game 4. After we finished game 3 yesterday, we all ate dinner, and then we went to have like karaoke at this dive bar, which is a lot of fun. So it was me, Coach, and then also some other content creators like
Partners War, Rerolling Ones,
McGronk from
Stormcar. Yeah, it's like Content Creator Central.
Yeah, and then we were just all hanging. I mean, it wasn't really planned. We all just kind of went out there because Aaron was like, okay, yeah, let's go to have a dive bar. I'm like, okay, and then the drinks were amazingly cheap there. It was like $3 or $4 a person, a drink, and then we were just there till like 2-3 a.m. We didn't get back until like 4 a.m. actually. So we were all waking up, and this is 10 a.m. Kind of recovering from our little hangover. So as soon as I saw ogres again, I was just like, well, damn, I gotta step up once more. So I was playing against Randall Brasher from Austin Weird Knobs. So the shirt you're wearing. So yeah, I think he's a team captain of Weird Knobs, or he's like one of their like captains. But he's a really cool guy. So, and I knew it was gonna be like a fun game because Texans have a reputation here in the Age of Sigmar American community for being like really good. So I was like, okay, this is like a good challenge. So, this was Realmstone Cage. So I knew this kind of favored the Ogre opponent because all he had to do was just charge the Stonehorns at me and be really aggressive before my Ren leveled up from like round 2 to round 3. So the first thing I did was, I thankfully won the defender role. So I put 2 Wildwoods in front of both our deployment zones. So his Iron Blasters couldn't shoot, my heroes because he knew my heroes were the ways I generated summoning points. So, started my turn 1 because I knew he had 0 GVs or Galatian veterans in his list. I just put some of my Galatian veterans on the point, and because they were expert conquerors, and I just summoned an endless spell which I used to move block, so he had to like come at me at a weird angle where I wanted him to come through. So then he gets it, and then so he kills my screen, takes the objective with 2 of his Stonehorns because he wanted to go second because I'm 10 drops and he's 8 drops. So I didn't make it proving ground in any of the turns. So, he wins so priority. I win the priority from turn 1 to turn 2. And I actually opt to take it because I wanted to put another Galatian veteran on there just to make him, have to fight for the objective still. So I do that. I kill some of his Mournfang pack with my Dragon Ogres. And then, I take the objective Galatian veterans in his turn. His Iron Blasters move up. They shoot into my 30 block of Zongors because they have to. And then the Frostlords of Stonehorn charge take back the point, and they actually get into my 30 block of Zongors and do a considerable amount of damage. And because I'm within 3 inches, I can't rally back in my turn 3. So that was kind of worrying, but thankfully I won the priority from turn 3 to turn 3. So the objective split up, and I was like, okay, at this point, I don't have to kill the Stonehorns. I just have to deal with everything else and play for points, which was pretty much my game plan throughout the entire game. Was that like, even though he was able to smash my Herdstone, I think his biggest mistake was that because he put his Frostlord on Stonehorn, he didn't. So when he charged in, he didn't pile into the 30 Zongors I retreated. So I was just able to keep rallying I was able to rally enough of the Zongors, even if he smashed the Hearthstone, even on a 6-up, where it's like I just kept taking the points from him. And I had my Zongor Enlightened on Dis. I always keep those guys alive to late game because they just are there to mop up, clean up, and score points. I have them kill the rest of the Iron Blasters and the Mortfang pack. So then by the end of the game, even though both his Frostlords and Stonehorn were alive, he could not score enough points to catch up to me because at some point he did win the Prio from turn 3 to turn 4. And then I actually made the objective proving ground so he couldn't take it. And then I actually gave him the double I actually gave him priority from turn 4 to turn 5. So I made another objective proving ground so he couldn't catch up to me in points. So yeah, I mean, that's why in Age of Sigmar, in 3rd edition, the double turn does not matter as much because whoever goes second also has like a lot of power into what can be controlled and what can't.
Both seasons have benefits. Obviously, there's no proving ground in the upcoming season, but in this battle plan, there definitely was. Yeah, it's very interesting because for anyone who's not familiar with this particular battle plan, there's only one active objective until turn 3 where that explodes and it will relocate to 2 objectives on different points of the battlefield. So yeah, you want to fight over this middle objective, but know that it's going to explode. So you need the movement. You need to be able to anticipate where it could possibly be on the battlefield. And that was really my focus going in. By the way, you've got a lot of movement in your opponent. So if you could kind of whittle down those Mornfang pack, tie up the Frost Lords, or even be able to just remove some of them, it's going to mean that, when it explodes in turn 3, you're in a good position, especially with the amount of bodies and the summoning and some of the backfield stuff you can possibly do.
Yeah, and I was really proud of like my own generalship versus this ogre player and another ogre player because it really taught me, okay, you don't have to kill the big scary thing. You can just leave it alone and just play the game. And that's what my win condition was, and I met it.
No, great call. Yeah, I agree with you. You don't always have to go bloodlust and try to pull down the Frost Lords. And actually, sometimes, like in the case that I had just a couple of games ago, ignore Archaon. If you can kill Archaon, cool. But if not, actually, you're better off probably killing the rest of the army because then there's only one model scoring. So keep that one in mind. I played against Jeremy Shaw, as I mentioned, Stormcast Eternals, Hallowed Knights. Gardas gives like a 5-up ward bubble to anyone within 12. So this worked really well for my opponent, given we're fighting over one objective. He got top of turn 1, so he was able to like literally drop Gardas down on the objective. Having things like the Nitroconus, what my opponent would do is he would put his Fulminators from memory on the table and put his dragons in reserve. So being able to re-roll the charge, he wanted to basically get in my face turn 1. So what I did was I deployed my 3 megas in a diamond. So I had my War Stomper, my Gatebreaker, King Broad, and then I put a baby on each of them. So I put basically I was trying to screen my megas. But also what I was trying to do was if he did hit a charge with the dragons or whatever it might be, because they're within 3 inches, I'd be able to, and Mega Gargants have a really good weapon range. It means that if he got into combat with a baby, it would mean that my other Megas could be able to fight as well. So it was a big trade piece that was going on. And that would actually be a deterrent for my opponent. My opponent would try to get into combat and try to not pull in my Megas, which then meant that he put a lot of resources in to not get the maximum output because he wouldn't want to pile in. He'd give up some of his 1-inch ranges because he just didn't want to pull in the mega. So that's exactly what happened. Turn 1, put Gardas down, put the Fulminators on the objective, as well as the Vanquishers. So a lot of bodies on the objective while the dragons went straight into combat. They pulled down a Man Crusher, a 12 wound idiot, because he wanted to avoid the megas getting into combat. And then in turn, because he avoided my megas getting into combat, it meant that I could do the mortal wounds on the charge, where if he would have went in and tagged them, I wouldn't have been able to do mortals on the charge. And then because of the range of the weapons, I was able to get like my Mega Gargants were able to pull down the 2 units of dragons. And then I would go in and proceed to fight the Fulminators, obviously pull down the Vanquishers. a lot of good trade pieces here and there, but I think I won the double going in from turn 2 to turn 3. And because of that, I was able to start again. Fulminators want to charge you as well. They do extra damage on the charge, while I was able to charge them and mitigate that too. So between the mortals on the charge, being able to reduce the damage that he does because he's not charging, I was able to just slowly grind down the force. The dragons were gone. The Fulminator started to go, the Vanquisher started to go, and then by the time that the Realm Stone had exploded in turn 3, I think all he had left on the table was one unit of Fulminators that was like half damaged, the Knight Incantor, and he's respawned Vanquishers because he used Call to Aid. But I had more bodies. He was never going to take an objective off a Mega Gargan who was counting as 20 on an objective, and it just became mission impossible.
Yeah, I mean, definitely sounds like, because you also play Stormcast, you just like played around your opponent, and I think Realmstone Cage is really good for Gargans. And from looking at his list, outside of the Fulminators, I don't think 2 dragons on their own can kill a Gargan, and I feel like all you have to do is just play patiently and wait for the points. And I think Gargans can actually outgrind Stormcast in this because there's no long strikes, there's no like heavy damage outside of Fulminators.
And that was my feedback to Jeremy. I said, I think you blew your load a little too early. I think if you're going to charge with the dragons, charge in at the same time with the Fulminators, because I could handle the dragons on their own. But if you also charged me in, did the mortal wounds from the Fulminator Dragon Breath, you also did more damage with the Fulminators, you would have pulled down a Mega. So I think it was a bit too aggressive too soon, and I was then able to kind of respond.
Yeah, and because the objective split up, at some point when Gardas comes down, he's just kind of stuck where he's at.
So well, he got us turned 1. He got us turn 1. So, and not having like a Lord Relictor, he wasn't able to teleport Gardas around. Look, the bubble in the middle was really generous, but when it exploded,
you could just ignore him. Yeah.
I mean, I killed him by turn 3 in the end anyway, but yeah, I could ignore him if I needed to. So we are both now victorious. I won 26-4. So you're 3-1. I'm 3-1.
Yeah. I was thinking at this point, man, am I going to match the coach? We'll see.
It was very possible. I had a few people going, "Oh, we're going to play," and obviously there's so many people. It's just hard to know who to match up. Which then leads us to, funnily enough, your last opponent is in the chat. So you'd be nice to Zach. Zach played Suns with the Breaker Tribe, War Stomper, Gatebreaker, King Broad, 3 Man Crushers. Very similar, actually exactly the same list, basically brother Zach. And I play against Roberto, who I believe was using Noe's list, I think, from memory. Like when I saw this list, I'm like,
he literally borrowed Noe's list.
When I saw this list, I'm like, I know this list because Noe talked to me about it like 6 to 8 months ago. So I played against another Stormcast Eternals list, but a very different AoE list. And we were playing the Nidus Path. So this has a little points on the corner where you can teleport in the movement phase, which was going to be interesting for my opponent because he has not a lot of bodies. But before I talk about your opponent, my game, talk about yours.
Yeah, so it was game 5. It was the last game of for both of us for LVO because the top 8 was going to move on. So I was really excited. This has been a great year of Age of Sigmar and just the tournament in general. So when I saw who I was playing against, I introduced myself to Zachary Powell. Hi, I know you're in the chat. So so Zachary Powell, is I think he's a player and I think maybe a community leader of the Age of Sigmar scene all the way in Utah. So we got to exchange a lot of words, and he never played against Beast of Chaos before. So I was taking the time to explain to him everything because I don't ever like to play with gotchas or I only win because you didn't know something. I don't like to win that way. So I make sure I explain everything, and then throughout the game, because old Second Edition Beast of Chaos book is really convoluted. So even when I was playing, I was saying everything, and because I already know how Giants play, he didn't have to explain anything to me. So we actually got to chit chat a lot while we were playing. So, this is Nidus Pass. And then essentially my plan against Gargants this game was to, spread them out across all the objectives, take out one Gargant at a time, and then, take out the babies and just keep summoning it and just put the pressure on, which I was able to do this game. So I think by the end of the, it was kind of a grind, even though our game was actually really quick. We finished with like an hour to spare, and then we just chatted the rest of the time. But then essentially, I was able to bring down the War Stomper and then all the babies on their own while I left the Gatebreaker and King Broad alone, because with summoning, he had to like hold back his giants, where like I was just able to pressure him where I want to. And then, although he did this really cool thing at the end of the game where he's like, okay, I want to get a 5th tactic. So I just told him, just gun for my Hearthstone, just get a 12-inch charge and, and roll that 3 up. So, I was really excited for him just to like do this, because by the end of the game, I think I was already like winning it, but, I want to encourage my opponent to get the 5th turn tactic. So first he rolls a 3-inch charge. So I'm like, spend the command point to reroll. So then he sends a command point. He gets a 12-inch charge on King Broad. He gets into my Hearthstone, rolls a 6 up to bash it just to get the Giants battle tech. So he get 5 tactics throughout the entire game. That was honestly my favorite moment in the entire game, because I was just so happy, for him to do well. Even though I did still like, play to win, but I'm glad that like, I was able to give, Zachary a really fun game, and we got to talk a lot. And, if I have enough time, I definitely want to like come to the Utah events and play, Age of Sigmar, because they are West Coast. And, yeah, I think outside of playing Owen Jackson for game 3, this was my other favorite game from the weekend.
Awesome. So you finished 4 wins and 1 loss.
Yeah.
So my last game was a game that I ended up being when I looked at the list, I was relatively confident I would walk away with this one, unless I played like a complete potato. So that was basically the way I would play as a potato, would be putting all of my Mega Gargants and my regular babies all in a small area, like if I was castling up. So basically what I described in my last game, if I did the same thing, I would be punished. So the way this list works is you have a whole bunch of these Night Vexillers with the Meteoric Standard, and they have a once per game, basically pick a point in the battlefield, is it within 24 inches, and it does a bunch of mortal wounds. So this would be really good against like Nighthaunt, really good against any particular army that doesn't have a lot of wounds, and it relies on a lot of characters. So if I ran my Daughters of Cain or my Stormcast or my Gits even, the Night Vexillor could do real damage. And there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. In addition to all of that, you've got those Judicators with Sky Bows who do mortals on 6s to hit. In addition to all of that, you've got Annihilators, who are the defensive Annihilators. They have a 2-up armor save, but when they come down from the sky, they do mortal wounds to everyone within 9 inches. Now, Roberto didn't have a Lord Imperatant, which meant that he had to come outside of 9, where traditionally the trick is you'd have Imperatant, which means 1 unit per round can come in within 7, so you would do more mortal wounds. And being that they were the shield ones, they weren't as damaging in combat. So I didn't have to worry about the Grand Hammers. So basically what I did was I deployed my army as spread out as humanly possible. So it means that whenever he used his once per game banner, it would only hit 2 or 3 units at worst. So with the chip mortal wounds, he wouldn't be able to do enough to pull one down. And yeah, those Annihilators come from the sky. And Roberto took turn 1. He outdropped me. He went aggressive. And I don't think he killed any of my models by turn 1. So even though he used the Annihilators, even though he used the Sky Bolts, even though he used the Relictor, the Vexillor, sorry, it just wasn't enough damage to pull down any of my models, which meant that I could then respond. And he had no real tricks up his sleeve. Yeah, he could do Annihilator charges. That's relying on a 9. The 5 Judicators with Sky Bolts are not enough to pull down a Mega, and that's what he was going for, trying to pull down the Megas. And I just didn't have the damage, and I was able to start lifting things on the charge and in combat. I had the threat potential as well with the Nidus Path, because he's mostly controlling the board with one, like little heroes. And even the Annihilator's a small unit. So it just became, I think Roberto stopped scoring battle tactics by turn 3 or turn 4. Turn 3 was his last battle tactic. By turn 4, turn 5, he stopped scoring them because he didn't have the bodies to contest objectives, didn't have the battle tactics to score with these little one model weirdos, and it just became too much. It was a lot of fun, but it was just a really bad matchup for him. Like, this is just a complete bad matchup.
Yeah, because that list entirely relies on knocking out like half of the opponent's army or like most of the opponent's army before they could do anything. Because once it blows its low turn 1, it literally just does nothing else but like score for points. And I mean, like, I don't know. We have kind of like a crude nickname for this list. I don't know if I could say it on stream, but I'll give you permission.
Maybe we'll hold this one off.
Yeah. But I mean, it's basically, I know Roberto. He's awesome. He's the life of the party to be around. He's he's one of the most interesting people in SoCal, that's for sure. And we question a lot what he does.
It was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, but I think if this was on the last battle plan, the Realmstone Cache, which has a much smaller deployment zone, it could have been a little bit different, because when you're boxed in with Realmstone and there's nowhere to hide, then those once per game meteoric standards could do some serious damage. I can't avoid it. But being on the Nidus path, which is a very generous Tetris style deployment zone, there was enough space for me to spread out and not take as much damage as I possibly should. So it's very unique. It'll do great damage to certain builds, but against mine, as long as I didn't beat myself, I'd be fine.
Yeah, it's definitely a castle breaker list. Like, let's say if this had to go against like Lumineth and like Sentinels, this list would love to fight something like that.
Daughters of Cain with the regeneration of snakes with a shrine and like Xanthar Kai stuff. Boom, you're gone. Your snakes are gone. Your Lumineth castle's gone. A lot of those armies, like the Tzeentch, like if you come up against the Tzeentch castle, it would pull down your bin chickens and all of the key support pieces with just the amount of mortal wounds it deals.
Yeah, and I think this went also I don't know how it placed at CanCon, but I know it went 5-0 at CanCon, something like this. So, it's definitely a list archetype that's strong.
Yeah, it does do quite well, but and this is the thing, right? Tournaments are about not only how good your list is. There's a lot of luck as well, depending on the draw, depending on who you play, depending on the battle plan. So, then plenty of times where you go to a tournament and you had the right army against the right opponent in the wrong battle plan. And if you just had a different battle plan, things could have gone very differently.
Yeah, I mean, I played against Noe's list against Noe, and when I was playing my Beast of Chaos, all I did was just hide most of my stuff, and then so there's some armies can counter it or just don't have to worry about it. But yeah.
So the tournament ended, as you've mentioned. Noe Singh took it out in the end. So at the end of the 5 games, there was one shadow round to determine who finished in the top 8. And then there was a knockout on day 3. And the final was up between Scooter Nick Walters and Gio Noe Singh. So how do I pronounce the name? Is it Jiwan?
Jiwan Noah Singh.
Jiwan Noah Singh ended up taking it out. So he went 5-0, then absolutely kicked some serious butt. It was great to watch that all on stream. But reflections, I guess, to kind of bring this home, and I can go to work. What's your key takeaway from the LVO, and what are you most excited for the upcoming season? And will you be at LVO 24?
Of course. Are you going to be there with us to do Dive Bar Karaoke again?
Well, it's looking pretty good. And I've already had a couple of people jump on Patreon like, we want you to come back. So I'm going to throw a couple of dollary dues at me. So look, I have all the intention in the world. As long as things go okay at home, I will be at the LVO. So it's earmarked.
Yeah.
I had an incredible time. It was great. I really enjoyed myself both on the table and away from the table. So I definitely will be back if I'm allowed to.
We also need a rematch of the NBA arcade game.
Look, and to be fair, like I was as Tom, assistant TO, shout out as well to all the people who supported. It was great. Really appreciated the event that you ran. it was also cool to see, like, I was just like one position away from being a part of your top scorers for your SoCal United. So
True, you were. I think you did end up second or
nah,
third. So
yeah, I was
you
like,
know, yeah. I mean, you are. You're officially a member of SoCal United. As I'm the new team captain of the team. So you're always welcome to play under us.
so what's your reflection? Like, whether you had your time again, or maybe the thing that you're most looking forward to, like what's your tournament look into the future?
So, this LBO was definitely, it definitely felt like the capstone final event for this past year. It was an amazing year of me, playing in tournaments, meeting all these people and having, honestly, like the time of my life. And now, I'm happy that I get to do it all again, in the new season where, there's no bounty hunters, you know, all the objectives are like close. There's gonna be a lot. I think there's gonna be a really brawly combat meta coming into it, and I'm really looking forward to that because I love playing melee armies. And aside to that, I'm also looking forward to attending all the events. Like the next event I'm going to is actually tomorrow. I'm flying over to Texas to play in the Lone
Lone
Star
Star.
Grand Tournament. Yeah, so I'm actually playing old Beasts of Chaos because they're not allowing new gifts and new beasts yet because the list lock-ins were before those books came out. So yeah, I thought LVO was gonna be the last time I'm playing old beasts, but I get to do it, one more time. And, I have to pack today, but yeah, I think another thing I'm looking forward to is leading SoCal United and doing really well with it.
So I've actually got a little tournament tomorrow, like 30 odd players. It's a little event. And I'll be playing with my Gits for the first time. So I'll be picking up, well, not for the first time. Like I've been playing them since they very first came out. So I'm going to play up with a bunch of squigs and see how, not squig herd. I'm not cheesing out with like 70 odd squig herd folks. I'm not that kind of player. But I'm looking forward to playing around with the new heroes, the new all the new Galatian champions, trying out some of the new battle plans. To be honest with you, I haven't really even thought about much about it. So it'll be great to think about the new General's Handbook as well as the new battle tome. So getting little combinations together and seeing how the meta shifts and, how many Galatian champions are on the table, but also what the tournament season brings. But shout out to everyone, obviously, who was in the top 8, people who missed the top 8. It was an absolutely incredible event. I had a lot of fun, again, both at the tournament with my 5 games, but also everything that happened outside. And if you want to see what's inside the LVO, again, go check out the little video I put out recently, which gave you a bit of an insight and some film and some a bit of a vlog around the LVO and what a big tournament looks like. So they're not so scary. Everyone had a lot of fun, and hope to see people around.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize for not being on the mic. I was just talking to some family member. They were just asking me something, even though I told them that, hey, I'm having a stream. But
and Garrett, aka Tom, saying, if the takeaway isn't that the TOs are awesome, I'm never speaking to you again, Matt. That sounds actually like a nice little thing. Like maybe that actually wouldn't be so bad.
the TOs were all right.
They did a great job. They did an incredible job to have 325 whatever players. Didn't seem like anyone really had a problem. So a lot of cool heads, a lot of people who had a lot of fun. Matt, is there anything you want to say? I've got to go to work. Any shout outs, any call outs? I did have Brian previously on the stream who may have called you out. Do you have a response?
Well, I do have a response to that. The allegations that he tossed to me in the last video are obviously false, and I am going to put him in his place as the OG Beast Lord in the Sparkly Death Party match in Seattle next month. So yeah, and then also my other shout outs are, I want to shout out my regions, SoCal and SoCal United. You guys got me into playing events. Love you all. Got to shout, Gareth Thomas as a TO. He's okay. I think Scott is a little bit better than him. And then I want to shout out, all of the the teams I've met, traveling like Tough Crowd, Harambe's Heroes, and all the players. And I personally want to shout out, G1 Noah Singh for, winning the tournament. I'm really happy that we got to have all this, fun competition that we had playing for top beasts. And, I'm glad that, you took the title, and I hope that, you as the co-captain lead Team America to win Worlds. So yeah.
No, I can't quite agree with that one. I know a lot of my audience is America, but obviously I've got to give some love to Australia. So This is awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for your time. If you were at the tournament, let me know in the comments what your favorite moment was. I hope to get out to more international events now that hopefully the pandemic is over and things go back to normal. And I'd love to go out to the UK, and I'd love to go out to more tournaments outside of my region. So let's see what the year looks like. Let's see how we go with Beast of Chaos and new gits. Be curious to see how we all go with our new books and where the power is. Yeah. All right. I'm going to go to work.
Yeah, and I got to go back to work too. I have some meetings, but thanks for having me again, Coach, and hopefully we get to do it again next year.
LVO 24. LVO 24.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. See you, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Peace.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double one on a spellcast.